Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chummy. Eric Chummy. Politely Pushy. Politely Pushy. I'm Eric Chummy, and this is Politely Pushy.
Hey, Suzanne, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Shaun?
I am good. I'm ready to help lead us through, along with Patience, who will also be kind of guiding you through this interview today. But before we do that and jump in, wanted to see if just give yourself a quick kind of intro and your background, and tell everybody about yourself.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Ford. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the executive director of the most iconic queer organization in the world, as coined by WinFam, San Francisco Pride. I'm in my fifth cycle. This will be my fifth Pride in June. I've been most of the time I've been here with you all.
Yeah, no, we've very much enjoyed the partnership. I can personally say that you are my favorite account to work on. Um, and I think, it's part of it because just the great work that you and the organization are doing. We're so happy to be a part of it. Kind of wanted to jump in right there. For those who don't know, what is Queer Joy is Resistance?
We wanted to be able to send a message. We wanted our community to know that, first of all, on Pride Sunday, you definitely have the right to come together and to have joy. We can't miss that in our community. We spend a lot of the year fighting oppression and fighting, a lot of things, but we want to make sure that on Pride Sunday that you could come together and have joy. And then, we have to resist. And so we wanted to make sure also that people know that our heritage is wrapped up in resistance. So you could come together, you could love one another, and you could resist at the same time.
Yeah. And what made it a message for the moment? I mean, I think obviously just everything going on with the current administration was the thought to really lean in there and just showcase that you cannot silence us.
Right. I mean, we wake up every morning in this country, especially as a trans person, facing terrible oppression. There's new legislation, or someone's pulled their support from us. This political climate has been so difficult for our people, and we know that. We know we are called a lot of times about our opinion or what we suggest should be done, and then so that weekend, Pride weekend, the whole world looks at San Francisco to see what our response is. And we want to make sure that we're loving our community first. That's just should be our first job, is to love our community. We have to stand up to that oppression and say it's wrong, but we don't want to miss that part where we love our community.
Absolutely. I think it's super important to always kind of remind that community that we do love them and we do support them and we are here for them. Going into this year's Pride, what are you feeling? How are you feeling?
I feel optimistic in some ways. I feel the pendulum might be swinging some. I know that we've probably felt that way before during this person's administration, but I do feel a sense of we're going to emerge from this. I think, resistance in action is the theme this year, and we wanted people to have concrete ways that they can get together and that they can express their outrage and they can express their resilience about how we're going to move forward. I would like to see it switch more. The conversation start to be around, what are we going to rebuild? How are we going to make sure that everyone feels, brought along in recovery? We were with the mayor of San Francisco recently talking about that.
Very true. So this past year, we together as a Pride and Bospar won the PRWeek's U.S. Awards 2026 Best in Community Relations campaign for the work that we did for last year's campaign. Really kind of excited, and just happy that really stood out amongst what was a very crowded landscape, particularly among the PR entries. What were you seeing culturally, I guess, that others weren't, during last year's campaign?
Well, I think the corporate world, obviously there were some pullbacks, but I think with Bospar's help, we were able to spotlight that And I think what was really important with Bospar's help, we were able to call people back into the community. We called out the behavior, but we called the people back in. And I think that model, as long as I've been an executive director of San Francisco Pride, sometimes we fail, but for the most part, Bospar's helped us make sure that we did that. We have to stand up and say, this is wrong. There were some corporations that had let us know they were going to leave, and we called that out. But then, we got some callbacks after we started talking about this with Bospar's help. And I think we kept a loving attitude, and above all else, I want to do that. We can't be an organization that's based in hate. It just doesn't work. That's the other side's job. We have to be an organization that's based on love. And I think that you could see that in all our relationships, especially our relationship with Bospar. We love our teammates at Bospar, and they're part of the family, and that comes through, I think, in the messaging.
Honestly, right back at you. We feel the same way. It's more of a family at this point than it is a business partnership.
True.
Curious the role the community voices played last year, because I think that was a big part in really helping the campaign come to life and showcasing, particularly as a lot of the sponsors that you had worked with for years backed out, how their voices really helped to shape and drive the campaign forward in moving the needle. The media, I remember last year when it happened, I believe we were on interviews back to back, almost every other day, calling it out. I'm curious, for those who think that there isn't something that you can do, when you're sitting there hopeless at home, there is, right? And there is a role that the community can play in really helping to make sure that those voices are lifted, and that you do get they do have a say.
We raised some individual donations. They really came up. It wouldn't be enough. I mean, in this game, like our budget, it just, you can't hardly raise enough individual donations to make up for 4 or 5 major sponsors. But through the donations, through the support in the community, there were other executive directors at queer nonprofits in San Francisco that highlighted the issue. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. If I wasn't on an interview, somebody was calling me to say, we're with you. I think it galvanized the community. Even this year going into the cycle, people were like, hey, how are those corporations treating you? I think people saw that they did have a part in San Francisco Pride. And if the corporations thought that by pulling out, they were going to dampen our mood or our support, that's not what happened. I think if nothing, we had to keep everybody like, okay, yes, some of these corporations have done some poor things, but the people at the corporations are our siblings. So let's not, it's always a fine line. And I really felt through the whole thing that the community was pulling for us, and that's extended into this year.
And I think that was really shown in proof forward in the Queer Joy is Resistance, right? It's like you may think that what you're doing is going to hurt or maybe silence, but it's actually resisting is what is going to light a fire for us and really help drive us forward and push us to go even farther.
Shaun,
go ahead, Patience. Sorry.
Let me add in also from a media relations point of view, through our collaboration, we're constantly working with SF Pride from the Bospar side. And we saw at the beginning of last year, this real cultural uncertainty with what the administration was going to do, what this DEI rollback was going to look like nationwide. And I think that we were able to really hit on some radical honesty to put Suzanne's face out there and say, we need community help. And this is exactly what's going on inside your favorite organizations. And this is exactly what you can do. And I think, Suzanne, you would have the right number for it, but those community donations really, I think, were record breaking, or at least near record breaking for last year.
Yeah, it was a huge increase over the prior year. I haven't seen anything like it. I hope that we are continuing, and I think there's a lot of momentum this year. But for sure, being up in the media and talking in a real way was a help to the organization. I think the board members, they're volunteers. And for them, I think it was a proud moment, that story being up in the media, and that they knew that we were fighting the fight. But it all goes back to our resilience as a community. We know what this community has faced since the dawn of time. But, 70s, 80s, 90s, on through, every generation has had their moment in our community, and this is our moment. And I think that this story and the theme, just all of that, and going to the community and saying, this is your pride, I think it really worked.
I'm curious going into last year, because like as you were going in, particularly in the May timeframe, right? I mean, you were going in with a deficit, right? And we were seeing corporations pulling out. When did you start to feel the tide starting to shift?
Well, when a few of them returned, I mean, from a corporate standpoint, it did shift, and we from a corporate standpoint, we were okay. Individual donations, we were okay. Last year was a tough year as far as receipts from the event itself. We lost some funding in the mayor's office, so that debt carried on into this year. We're still facing it. I hate the fact that we're still in a precarious situation. The story last year did its job, but there were some other areas where we couldn't control with our story, and that debt carried on into this year, and it's making us. I didn't want to be talking about it this year. I just wanted to be talking about the success of that campaign. But we're still in a very precarious situation. Normal people would just pack it up and leave town, and I've thought about it, but we need to tell. You all know we're in the back end. We need to tell that story again in a new. It's different. It's a different story. It's not just about corporations pulling out. This story is about city funding. This story is about making sure that individuals know that San Francisco Pride is still very fragile, and you can't take it for granted. I know that every year you cannot take for granted that it's going to happen. It's right now. It looks tough. I think it's April 21st. We have to, we really have to find about $800,000 in about 6 weeks.
I'm curious, what in your perspective, what do you think the media got wrong about the story last year, and what are you hoping that it comes across better this year, that they get right?
I think it's more it's not an easy story. It's not as simple as bad corporation, good. It's just not that. We have a very nuanced argument about corporations and how they should be involved. But I think what gets left out is our queer siblings that work at those corporations. I'm in touch with that, given what's happened over the last couple of weeks. But this story misses out sometimes on all those queer employees that work at places like Apple or Amazon, or plug anybody in there. And the story becomes about the corporation and San Francisco Pride, and they're not there. And San Francisco Pride, obviously, we're responsible to our community that sometimes criticizes the corporatization of Pride, but we're also responsible for those queer people that work at those corporations, and that they feel seen and heard. And I think that's really, sometimes San Francisco Pride, we have to be reminded that they're our job too.
And that's a balancing act for you, because you really have to juggle multiple things at once and hold multiple things to be true, right? You can't just say, oh, this is, we're giving up on this organization because of this, when that there's good people working at the organization, that they just may not have that a say in the decision making.
And sometimes there were corporations last year that gave us money that told us not to tell anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And you could see why people would criticize that. But then, a few years ago, there were a lot of people that were angry that people would give us money and you'd see their logo and shirt everywhere. And so it's, but that's my job, really. I don't want to, I'm not whining. My job is to absorb that and do the right thing for the platform, to make sure that in 50 years from now, that there's an executive director at San Francisco Pride who's trying to balance all of these interests, and absorbs it when there's no person that could really balance all that and get it all right. We just can't.
Curious, what do you see as was last year your hardest year, or do you think that the years ahead are?
That's a great question. I think in 2022 was the hardest year if I had known what I was facing. I was kind of ignorant, and I got the job in February, and we had $100,000 committed to us, and it was the
I
first
remember.
Pride out of the pandemic, and I didn't know anything I was doing. But that ignorance was bliss, really, to tell you the truth, because if I'd have really known what we were facing, I don't think I would have said, yes, I can do it. So I think that should have been the hardest year, but maybe it wasn't. Last year was really difficult. I had to go away after the event and really consider if I could keep going forward. Especially, we had a tough financial year. It still was a difficult year financially. So I guess last year was very difficult. This year I have a team. I always have Bospar, which is great to get on a call and have 4 or 5 people there that are pulling for you and doing the work. This year I have a consultant for grants and for individual donations, Gail Roberts. I have Win Fam's helping me with sponsorship now. We just hired 2 new members, Abby and Sydney. And we have Greg and Marcia as contractors. I mean, I told everybody yesterday we were on a meeting and I had all those people in one meeting. And I was like, I've never, ever had a meeting at San Francisco Pride and had this kind of team assembled. I just hope that I can find the dollars to keep everybody in place and keep the doors open, because I think we're on the verge of really I haven't been a great builder, Shaun. I've been a great crisis executive director. I think I have faced things that most people would have ran from, but I have not been a great builder. And I've let Chris Roberts have a bigger role this time. And we're on the verge of building something that I think I could say, okay, it's okay place. I'll let a new person with new ideas come in, but I just have to make sure here in the next 6 or 7 weeks that we can find some money and pull a miracle out of the hat.
See, I push back on that you're not a great builder, because I feel like you're constantly having your legs cut out from under you, right? So like, it's not that you are not a good builder. I feel like it's that as you build, you constantly have that resistance and things that are coming at you that you're having to rebuild. But I do agree that, right, it's always better to have more team, and I think that's a lesson that you're learning, right? That's the more team, the better, because then, with multiple builders, multiple people are building, you're going to build more.
It just has to translate into dollars. That's the thing. We're waiting on a large possible grant award, waiting on that decision right now. We have the June 10th Pride kickoff at the Castro Theater. We're having a fundraiser. We're having a VIP party, a donor party up on the mezzanine before that. I'm really looking forward to that. Some friends are holding a private fundraiser on May 14th on my birthday in a very beautiful apartment overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. Yeah. So there's some good things coming. We are continuing to talking to corporations. I've got Win now. Things are happening. Like right now, there's things going through my email that Win's taking care of. Is so great. So, yeah. We're going to find a way. There's just no other choice. But I really I hope next year Bospar's telling a different story, that we are telling a story of how the campaign this year led us to not only last year's theme, last year's event was so unifying. I thought it was the most unifying day I've ever had in the city of San Francisco. I really think at the event that Sunday, I have joy everywhere. It was just everywhere I looked, people were relieved. Like, we're together today. San Francisco Pride is still happening. We are like the constant, we have San Francisco. We have this city where those values they still mean something. And we have San Francisco Pride, and we have each other. So I felt that. I think that's the number one job, but we got to translate that into financial success. And that's what we're working on now.
Absolutely. I'm curious, were you surprised at how much the campaign broke through last year?
I really was. Wall Street Journal was was sitting here interviewing me. Yeah, we were in, I think there with Japan, Tokyo's leading newspaper interviewed us. We were on the German version of the BBC. They interviewed us. I was surprised. I'm glad that it, I'm glad that it came in my fourth Pride, so that I had a little bit of practice with local media, and it really didn't freak me out. I really enjoyed it, to tell you the truth. But I was shocked that I I almost don't like it. I wish some other things would reach them other than the demise of the possible demise of San Francisco. Maybe you all know better than me. Maybe that's what sells, is a possible demise of a longtime organization. I don't know.
What I thought was hopeful was that the pushback, right? Like, while the well, it's very easy to get caught up in the sort of the hopelessness of, right, when you look at like the current policies coming towards the community and just always being under attack. What I think was hopeful for me was that we were able to see a little light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, no, I don't think we're all alone, right? I think that there's more of us out here that do believe in the right thing and doing the right thing. And I think that was reflected in maybe not necessarily the media, as they were just sort of telling the story of corporations pulling back, but as we started to see some of these corporations come back, and and those individual donations that you mentioned, which reached an all-time high.
It was reassuring. Even the people that interviewed us, you could feel a sense of community with them. They were there to tell the story because they cared. I know that they knew that they would get a lot of clicks and all that, but you could tell that people were there interviewing us. They cared. A lot of those people were our siblings. And I could tell, if we didn't matter, this wouldn't have been a big story. You could tell that people were, it just that there's so many things right now competing for people's attention when it comes to organizations that need help and support. It's really hard. I think you all did a tremendous job. I don't know how you did it, but we rose above all of it. And it wasn't just for a day. I think, I'm seeing that with what's going on now. Like, how long are we going to be able to elevate this? How long do people want to talk about this? This story would not go away last year. And I really appreciate that.
And I think we're starting to see that this year as well. And then that's what I'm curious, like, where does Queer Joyous Resistance go from here? Do you want to talk about this year's campaign or this year's theme coming up early, and what's planned?
Well, Resistance in Action, we wanted some continuity between last year's theme and this year's theme. The artwork is similar. We want that feeling of queer resistance, of queer theory, if you want to say. We want that, so that everybody knows we're scrappy and resilient. We're still here. We're still fighting, but we're still loving. And I think the ability to do both those things is what sets us apart. And that's what I hope this year's theme, we're going to resist together. We're not going to resist individually. We're going to see everyone during the process. I think what you saw, the motto with Phil's Coffee, just last week, they make an announcement they're going to take away the flags in their stores. Well, we resisted in a loving way, though. Shaun, one of the best things about that protest, and it was just it was like 15 people, indivisible SFs and some people. But before we started, I went into the store and told the workers, I said, listen, we're not mad at you. We're here to support you. And then we did the protest. I went back in the store and said, how are you all doing? And talked to them for a few minutes. And I've been in that store before. I don't go in every day or every week. And so then the following week, when we met with Mahesh, the CEO, I run into the store and I was going to tell the workers, like, hey, your CEO's coming. He was already there. He was standing behind the counter. So they witnessed Jupiter and I sit down with their CEO. They watched it. I could feel them. They were working and they were watching us talk to their CEO about this policy. And you can bet they work in the Castro. A bunch of them were queer. And then on Thursday, I came back in and met the CEO, and it was evident that he was going to change the policy, and they were so happy. Then the next day I was down there, I did 3 or 4 TV interviews in front of Phil's. Again, went in there, they had my drink sitting up on the counter, and they were so happy that we cared. And then if you go on social media, not everybody's happy that we cared. There's different opinions, but I know the opinions of those people that work at this Castro store. And I've got a feeling that's been replicated in many, many stores. And that's the thing that'll keep me going. And I think it should inform everything we do together at Bospar and SF Pride when we're crafting our stories and when we're trying to get attention, is that the look on those people's faces to know that we cared. And let's think about that too, Shaun. We, in the middle of everything, in the middle of needing $800,000, the next right thing to do was to stop and run down there and have a protest at 4 p.m. on a Friday. And then, that took, I'd say, 8 to 10 hours of the following week to get that agreement. And that's valuable time. But, I'm meeting with their CEO today, and there's a possibility that we interview him on the stage at the Commonwealth Club for the Human Rights Summit. And there's a possibility that Phil's helps with some of that $800,000. And we're going to talk about a possibility of a sponsorship today. All of that is a result of doing the next right thing and telling the story in a loving way. If we had bashed them,
that's to me what makes you so good at your job, because yes, you have this monumental goal that you have to raise this money for the upcoming Pride, but you never lost track of the script, right? You know that the overall goal is to make sure the community is seen, right, and that you're fighting the battles along the way, of getting to the larger goal. And I think that's what was so important. And I think that this lesson of what happened with Phil's is a great lesson going into Pride Month, right? It's really that it's never too late to do the right thing. And that's what you always say, we're not calling you out, we're calling you in. So to any corporation that's, looking to get in there and, say, maybe we made a mistake last year, or maybe, we have said things that, we don't believe now. It's never too late to change.
Yeah. And you and Patience will be, obviously I think today we have a meeting and we'll be talking about the story going forward and how we're going to use this story to call more people in. That's our job now. But I love, Bospar and us, we've developed that language. We don't have to spend a lot of time debating, the language. We know each other now, and you all have been doing this with us long enough. And, you've helped the fledgling executive director. I can't, if I look back at 2022 and I think about doing media interviews, and I was still struck by the bright lights a little bit, oh, wow, they want to talk to me. I don't feel that way now. I feel now like they should talk to me, and I'm not talking to them about Suzanne Ford. I represent the LGBTQ community, and not just in San Francisco. It's obvious. We had a meeting this morning. It was kind of tense, and I could feel the power of saying, that's not good behavior, and we're not going to stand for it. And not because it offends me personally, because it doesn't see our community. It doesn't acknowledge the work we're doing and the people we're representing. And that's incredible. What an opportunity to get to do that work.
I like that you say more than just San Francisco. Suzanne, I'm thinking of an interview we had just earlier this year with a reporter in Middle America who was grateful for your voice, your determination to be constantly in action, constantly resisting, because it gave her space to continue to write stories about something that needed visibility. And I think that that's a really interesting note that we've heard back from journalists, is your willingness to call people in to call people out when needed and to keep speaking on these issues means that there are more people paying attention, gives them space to be more visible. Um, I don't know if you want to add anything else about your journalist interactions, but I found that so
Yeah,
interesting.
I think that was the story in Kansas, probably. Yeah. That was incredible to be talking to a reporter in Kansas about something that happened the day before in their legislature, their terrible, terrible 2 laws that they passed, and the 1,700 people that received notices that their IDs were no longer valid. The platform at San Francisco Pride is what's important. I understand people can do different things with the platform. You could, if you say, okay, we're protesting Pride or we're protesting a corporation involved with Pride, that's fine, because you can use the platform of San Francisco Pride to highlight what I respect that when people do that. But that platform is real. Like that, I think there were a lot of times in our history at San Francisco Pride where we didn't do that interview with the reporter in Kansas, and we missed an opportunity. And then I think also being the first transgender executive director, I'm acutely aware of. I'm a transgender ambassador. I probably get in places that a lot of transgender people don't get. Bospar was, with HRC Fertility, made sure that I was at the media gala last year, and I was I looked around. There were no other trans women in that room, and that was like 500 media people in San Francisco. And I think I think it's people may ask, why do we say anything about something that happens in Kansas? That's the reason. We want to use our platform to say and defend, and we also want people to see trans people in leadership positions, and we want to stand up for the right thing, and we want to do it in, well, I won't say the right way. We want to do it in a certain way. I think it's just, we want to do it in a loving way. I don't want to be like the other side and always be full of venom. And I think it's great that we got to do that story in Kansas. I wish we could do more. I think that's the importance of this team and finding the dollars. It will allow us to do more of that. And I think, we could be doing a ton of it, and we're not able to yet because of the financial situation. So I hope that, I think maybe we should use that, maybe we should use that in a story. Maybe that should be something we can call on donations with this Phil's thing. Like, we want to do more of this work that we did at Phil's, calling out behavior, calling in people, finding resolution, moving on to the next thing. But we can only do that if people support us. So maybe I'll let you're the messaging expert.
But it's also about what I loved about that is it's getting your message out there to the people who need it the most, right? You always tell the story of growing up in Kentucky, right? San Francisco Pride was that shining beacon of hope, and you are continuing that legacy by paying that forward to others, who are, scared and who maybe don't know, that life can be better.
Yeah, I'm going to speak at the Human Rights Summit at World Pride in Amsterdam. I don't even know if you all know that. And what I'm going to speak on is what's next for the American Pride movement, because there USA Pride and Interpride just announced yesterday that they no longer have a cooperating contract between each other. And that's growing out of, there have been some hurt feelings on both sides, but there are some USA Prides that are saying, listen, we don't have the resources. We need to concentrate on ourselves here. We've got to fight here. And I'm going to fight. I'm going to say the exact opposite. And that's what's important too about the success of San Francisco Pride, because we support Interpride and we support USA Pride. But I'm going to say the exact opposite. American prides need to lean into the international movement. No matter what we face here, we still have more resources. We still have more reach. And San Francisco Pride is going to be on the side of liberating people all over the world. I know when we go all over the world, we were in Medellin last year, Guadalajara. When we go walk in the room and they say, oh, or we introduce ourselves, when we say San Francisco Pride, everybody in the room goes, they all look up. they know it's us.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna back away from that responsibility. In fact, we're gonna lean into it more. And I want every little kid, when I walk down Market Street, that crazy tall redhead trans woman, it's so important. I love it, first of all, but when I walk down that parade route in the front of the parade, all the people that see me have seen me on TV, or they've seen because of you all. If you should be with me that day, both of you all should come and watch. But when I go down that, people scream, Suzanne, oh, it's the woman on TV, Suzanne. And that's powerful. That's, first of all, it's good for my ego, but just kidding. The power of a trans woman leading that parade down Market Street and what that says to the world is so important, because the little kid, like you said, a little kid in Kentucky, the little kid in Kentucky shouldn't be here doing this. And it's all because of that reach of San Francisco Pride, of knowing that smart, creative people come to San Francisco to be who they are. And then once you do that, then you get this responsibility, like, oh, okay, I've reaped all the benefits. I have a big life in San Francisco. That means I have to be responsible for giving that back. And we take that seriously. Every day, we encounter that.
Yeah. I'm curious, what do you, as I love all that, what do you hope your legacy is?
Well, I think calling people in. I think standing up in love. I lost my composure a little bit yesterday on a meeting with several other organizations about our Saturday March. And I don't want that to be my legacy, but once in a while that comes through. But really, I want the legacy to be that some little kid from Kentucky who never thought she would get to be her true self came to San Francisco and felt the magic of San Francisco Pride, and then lived up to the responsibility of the life she got. I think, I want it. Yeah. And I am a transgender ambassador. I know that, even in trans community, sometimes I catch a little grief. Sometimes I'm seen as too moderate, but I know I speak a lot of different languages because I lived a different life until I was 45 years old, and I was in a lot of business rooms where it was a bunch of white men. But I hope that I'm making up for that time that I hid. I still got a lot to do to make up for that time that I wasn't standing up for trans people, that I was hiding. So I don't know. That's a long answer to your question, but
I think that little kid in Kentucky would be very proud of where you are.
Thanks so much for joining us, Suzanne. We're so happy to have you here. Hope you have a great day.
Have a great day, Suzanne. We really appreciate it.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.